Good evening. I'm going to call this evening's meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority to order. And we need to have a roll call and determination of a quorum, and we need to determine where John and John are. Maybe they're online, maybe they're not. So if we could start with that, that'd be good.
Chair Golden,
Here?
Vice Chair Harris, Treasurer Rogers.
Here.
Member Barrett, Member Hamilton,
Here.
Member Poles,
Here.
Member Hutter.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Okay, fair enough. Do we have a flag anywhere, or could you put a flag up on the screen? Oh, fantastic. Yep, okay. Carl, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. So does anyone have any idea where John and John are?
Mr. Golden, I did not hear from Mr. Barrett this week, but I had communicated with Treasurer Rogers, so I had anticipated him to be here. Also, I don't see present Gary Province, so if that comes to that item, we just move by that.
Okay, fair enough. We can deal with that. Go on to the approval of the minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority. Does anyone have any comments about those minutes? If not, anyone like to?
I move to approve the minutes. It's Bradley.
I'll second that motion.
Second that motion.
Thanks, Paul. You can second it. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Carl couldn't because he wasn't here.
I didn't because I wasn't.
So I guess that carries for, yeah, okay. Fair enough. Modification of the agenda. We reserve the right to do that, but we're not doing that tonight. We're just going to move right along. Had a discussion about public comment. We're going to be changing the way we deal with public comment going forward. Had some input from our council on this. What we're going to be doing from this point forward is we will accept public comment from any member of the public for items not on the agenda in the public comment section. Then members of the public can, if they so desire, comment where appropriate when we have a discussion on any agenda items. So is there anyone who has dialed in this evening that would like to provide us with any comment for an item not on the agenda? Anyone online? So is there anyone online for anything tonight? Yes? Okay. Are you folks, the two people, let's see, Kelly and Beth, are you going to be discussing an agendized item? Obviously, Beth, you are. Kelly, are you discussing anything non-agendized? No? Okay. I see.
No, non-agenda.
Okay, so you want to discuss something that's on the agenda, correct?
And Mr. Golden, Kelly Bowles is our bookkeeper, his firm.
That's fine.
So he's part of the, brought him here to answer any questions related to the audit.
Okay, and, okay, fair enough. I'll just assume there's no public comment at this time. So Ken, what do we want to do with the service award for Gary? Do you want to wait until a later date?
Yeah, unless he shows up between now and the end of the meeting, then we can always move to that item, but otherwise, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I am going to take the liberty as the Airport Authority Chair to thank a couple of our Airport Authority members. In particular, I want to thank Paul Hamilton for agreeing to volunteer for another 4 years. You're a glutton for punishment. Thank you, Paul. But your input has been invaluable, and I can tell you I really appreciate you joining us and being with us.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I also want to recognize Carl Hutter, who's been a personal friend of mine for a long time. And for those of you who don't know Carl, he's president and CEO of ClickBond. They're the largest manufacturer on the airfield. Carl has extensive background in aviation. In addition to being an airport user, I did not realize, Carl, that you have an ATP, which is very impressive. But Carl is really an accomplished gentleman. How he found the time raising kids and having a family to do this, I don't know. But Carl has signed up for another term on the airport authority. This is his second rodeo with the airport. So Carl, on behalf of the airport authority, thank you for volunteering your time and signing up, for a 4-year stint here. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to be back serving our fair airport. And to your note about family, I just hope this doesn't lead to Jen subscribing Mr. Takis's firm in their family law practice. But it didn't happen last time, so I don't think it'll happen this time. It's
I know
good to be
I know
back.
your kids. It's like I know you got your hands full, and I've been there. So, okay. Well, thank you both. I really want to. I can't acknowledge enough the gratitude we have and the gratitude the airport has for those who volunteer for this, because it is strictly voluntary. None of us get anything out of it. So, on that note, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which looks like a pretty basic deal. Here we have someone who has an office in our facility on Arrowhead. They're applying for a Class 2 FBO for aerial surveillance that they do not conduct here at the airport. So not really up for discussion unless anyone wants to pull it off the agenda. If you do, fine. If not, if we could have a motion to approve that, that'd be great.
So moved.
And we have a motion to approve aviation data as Class 2 FBO, providing aerial survey data to customers. Do we have a second?
I second.
Tim seconds that. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. We will move on to our items to discuss here on the agenda. First one is the approval of the annual audit report by the Carson City Airport Authority. I'll turn this over to Beth. Beth, it's all yours.
Thank you. I also have Beth Farley here. I'm retiring November 30. I think I have 6 more days till my retirement, actual work days. So Beth Farley is, I'm passing the baton, I guess, to her, and she's taking over. So, and she did do the technical review and has been involved in the airport's audit in the past. I believe you have a copy of the audit. The first thing I'd like to point out is that it is an unmodified audit opinion, which sometimes we call a clean audit opinion, which is what you want. We do have a couple findings in connection with government auditing standards that I'll review shortly, but I'm just going to briefly review the results of operations for 2020. And if you want to follow along, I'm going to go to page 24, which is your budget to actual report. And it reflects total revenue budgeted of approximately 1.2 million. And your actual revenue was 964,000, and I'm rounding. And the primary difference has to do with the amount budgeted for the FAA projects versus the actual. And that difference was approximately 280,000. So your revenue exceeded budget in all other areas. Your total airport service and supplies were budgeted at 220,000. Your actual expense, was 159,000. So you were 61,000 in airport service and supplies, better than budget. Your airport administration costs We're budgeted at 215,000 and they came in at 213,000. So total airport operations expenditures were 372,000, and I'm on page 25 if you're following along. You have capital outlay for the year of 462,000. So your total expenditures were approximately 841,000. You did lease some equipment this year for just under 50,000. So your excess of revenue over expenses totaled 173,000 this year compared to the budget of almost 100,000. So that increased your fund balance, which is good. Moving on to the rest of the financial statements are a lot of footnotes. I will point out that your financial statements do not reflect an other comprehensive liability for post health insurance. But in the future, now that you added another person, it could be that that person will have health insurance upon retirement based upon statutes. So you'll have to get an OPEB report, an actuary report next year. And Ken and I discussed that, so he would know. Page 33 is the first finding. And this is a carryover from prior year. However, I will point out that most of the issues we noted happened at the beginning of the year. And I know Kelly will probably talk about the issues and what they've done to resolve these issues going forward. But they have changed the bookkeepers, and toward the end of the year that we definitely saw the improvement. And the second has to do with, on page 34, has to do with material weakness regarding the amount of adjusting journal entries that we had to make. And again, mostly due to errors that were noted at the beginning of the year. Then we also issued a required management communication letter, and there's nothing unusual in there. It's just pretty consistent, just giving you the information as a result of the audit. I know I went quick, but I'm happy to answer any questions and allow Ken and Kelly to talk about the findings.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate your support in your position, and I wish you some concerts here in the future. I know we haven't had any this year. As Beth indicated, we do have Kelly Bolus on the line as well. Kelly Bolus owns a local firm called Bolus & Company, and we've contracted with them for about the last year and a half. Well, maybe it's been closer to 2 years now to handle the bookkeeping duties. And the two items that were noted as material weaknesses are something we've been ongoing work. I think we made a lot of progress on both of those items. We did do some modifications, some checklists that we use between the two of us to ensure that we're sharing appropriate information and that information is being properly recorded. And so I'll let Kelly Bolus comment on those items.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be on the call. Kudos to Beth for all the years of faithful work as an auditor. Mostly unappreciated. Auditors are usually not the most popular people in the world. So I wish you the best in your retirement. And thanks for doing such a good job for the Carson Airport. We have, as has been noted, identified a change in the way our bookkeeping staff are checked. We have new checklists that will pick up some of the problems that occurred early in the year that aren't occurring anymore. We did note that we had missed that there was a large asset purchase. We didn't realize exactly what it was. Our fault. We've now changed our procedures to require all purchase documents for any major asset purchases. Hopefully that won't happen again. Everything else seemed to flow as expected. The auditor, as a courtesy, actually prepares the financial statements. The auditor is always required that the client is the one that's supposed to prepare the financial statements. And the problem is we're real small organizations. They can't afford to to do that, to have the staff on board, so they have to hire somebody on the outside, and usually the cost of hiring a CPA who's not doing the audit to prepare the financial statements is more expensive than just letting the auditor do it. But we are available to do those financial statements if you choose to have us do that instead of the auditor in the future. Other than that, it's a pleasure working with Ken. He's a really great manager. You guys don't know how special he is. He does a really good job. He cares a lot. He's very conscientious, and we enjoy working with him.
I don't have anything else to add, Chair Golden.
Any other comments? Any members of the Airport Authority have any comments on this?
And Chair Golden, in light of any additional comments, I did prepare a proposed motion.
Yeah,
We're required by the NRS to approve the annual audit report. So at your discretion, that's available.
yeah, we do need to do that to
I'll
really,
make a motion.
go ahead, Bradley.
I move to approve the fiscal year 19/20 annual audit report of the Carson City Airport Authority conducted by, I'm going to get this pronunciation wrong, but Ide Bailey, something along those lines.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second to approve the audit report that's been presented?
I second the motion.
Fair enough. We have a motion and a second to approve the annual audit report of the Carson City Airport Authority for fiscal year 2018/2019. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. As you know, the airport chair does reserve the right to change the order of the agenda. I said I wasn't going to do that this evening. That's right. However, Gary Province
Can I
showed
just-
up after his agenda
Can I
item.
say one thing? Can I just say
Beth
one
is
thing?
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's Beth Cohn. Can I say one thing before I hang up? I just want to thank Ken he did a really good job. He's very conscientious and he wants it to be done right, and really appreciated working with you. Thank you, Ken. And thank you for all the years that the Airport Authority was my client. I really appreciate you.
Thank you
That's
very
all.
much,
Beth.
Beth.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Beth. Good luck.
Thank you, Kelly.
So we're
So
taking,
we'll see you later.
we're going to take this item out of order. We had skipped over it since one of the participants in this item wasn't here, but letter F, like Foxtrot, presentation of service award to Gary Province. Go ahead, Ken.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Anna for accompanying Gary today. Gary was on board when I came on in March 18, and Gary was a huge assistance to me, just for one, getting to know the lay of the land, and Gary's institutional knowledge, and just conscientious work ethic to always making sure that the priority was the runway first. And a lot of that was reflected in the time he took to ensure there was no FOD on the surface areas, and recognized that there were areas that, if there were a light out or there were some other equipment outages he was always, that was his priority, and I really appreciate that. I really didn't realize it until August 2nd when Gary left, how much that I did not know. And I spent a couple of months, Paul could attest to that I was walking around going like, hey man, I'm trying to figure this out, right? So I remember a couple of phone calls that I felt like the remote surgeon. I had Gary on the phone. I was bent over the PAPI, and he was telling me how to change a circuit board as airplanes are taking off and landing. And so it worked. So I can't fault that method, but not the preferred way to do it. So I know that it's been a couple of tough months for Gary. Prior to his retirement, he was in considerable pain, but he showed up every day and did what was asked of him as the best of his ability. And I want to take this opportunity to recognize him. So I'm going to join you down here, Gary.
I would like to thank the authority, present and past, for the opportunity I had to serve the flying community in Carson City. I have thoroughly enjoyed my employment and this opportunity in these last 10 years. There were some trying times, but all those times were times of opportunity of learning. And this experience has taught me a great deal about general aviation, which I had very little experience in the general aviation area. So I want to thank the authority, present, past, for enduring with me through those learning episodes on my behalf. Again, thank you for this and for being so considerate as to the limitations that I have experienced also. So I thank you again for this and for this opportunity to come before you and to see some old faces. Member Carter, or no, Cutter. I guess that's my email. Cutter, sorry. I knew I was going to mess that up. But anyway, so that's, I think, all I need to say. I could talk on for hours, as some of you know, but I won't. So thank you again.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Woo. Be well.
Okay, we're going to move on now to item number 4 for discussion and possible action, reviewing and discussing the strategic plan, annual work plan, performance measures. This is Ken. Go ahead.
Thank you. In your pile, there's a single sheet that I produced separately. It's the 5-year implementation schedule. But also there was a document in the board packet that I printed these out black and white because it's way cheaper. But on the inside, this document lists our initiatives. It looks like this up here. I don't know if you can see that. Lists the initiatives that we had for 2019, 2020. And we adopted this as a group approximately September of 2019. And there were several items that were we accomplished and achieved. I think there were 6 total items that were closed out, and that includes item number 1, which was the development of the long-term, intermediate long-term facility and equipment improvement plan. We implemented that, and we followed that on our budgeting process this last year when we developed our capital improvement budget. We secured 3 FAA grants this year. The AIP grant 33 for the runway rehab, and also includes the fence project. Those total about $1.3 million. The SRE, the snow equipment removal building design grant, which is going to be discussed here more in the future. The design is underway. And then the AIP 35 CARES Act grant. AIP 33 and 34 are 100% funded grants this year, so there is no local match. Doing the math, that equates to about $70,000 to the airport authority this year. And then the CARES Act grant itself was another grant for 60,000, or excuse me, 69,000. To go down to the next goal, which was provide for the safety and security of airport users. The other 100% goal on that was the completing the hangar emergency addressing project. That was a task that was difficult, but we were finally able to get it accomplished. I want to thank not just the fire marshal for his support on that, but also the city participated in that through the addressing work themselves, but also to the tenants of the airport who really got behind it eventually, and we got it done. So that was a benefit. The other two items in that area that are still below where we'd like to be, the all-terrain runway. I did some research on that and had a meeting with 5 operators on the airport that fly aircraft that are situated for that type of operation. And after some discussion with the FAA and some of my other colleagues, as well as involving our consulting engineer, Armstrong Consultants, there is not a good place to do that. We actually looked at some of the infield areas, but they are in the runway and the taxiway safety area, and simultaneous operations could not be prevented due to the fact that it's an uncontrolled airport. So we're not going to be able to move forward with that objective. The other item was the nighttime incident approach. We've made some good progress on that. The item that the step that we're at right now was to finalize the scope of work for a aeronautical survey. We got some feedback just last week from Lean Engineering, and Tim Pulis and I have reviewed some of that. We're going to be bringing that back to the board for a future item. We've also had some conversations with NDOT, and NDOT believes that they have the ability to conduct this survey, and if they do, that could be a big cost savings for us and help expedite it. But the time of year we're in right now, the survey needs to be done when they call leaf on, even though there's probably no trees that ever have leaves out in that area. They need to be on in case they do for I think the ability for the equipment to detect the obstacles in that area. So that's the next step. So we're probably looking at least at a springtime opportunity for that. We've had some discussions with the FAA about funding, and we don't have anything certified. So if we can get NDOT's participation in that would be a big step forward. I want to move on to the next goal, which is support economic activity in the region. We did grow lease revenue year over year, and that was because we expanded a couple of footprints in our area. From Tri-Motor LLC, we approved a 7,000 square foot improvement to their property that they're going to be going forward with for an apron extension. We do have a third party that is planning to lease space on the cell tower, and we have also gone to market for several of our vacant property through an appraisal that we're on, and we did a direct marketing piece. So we're getting some feedback on that, and I anticipate getting the appraisal back within the next couple of weeks. So this item will be coming back for the board. We're planning to do a feasibility study. We didn't get very far down the road on that feasibility study for passenger service. The objective was to try to have something in place for the legislative session coming up in 2021. That right now in the current climate looks not practical at all. So we have not made any further movement on that item. The last item was the renaming of the airport. The goal was originally to rename it Carson City Lake Tahoe Airport. We didn't get that far, but we did get it changed from Carson to Carson City Airport. And that item for updating the FAA charts and directory is still in their court, and I anticipate that coming out soon. It's still showing up as Carson Airport, I believe, and all the FlightAware and those sort of resources. Moving down to maintain positive relationships with the community. We were impacted greatly in that effort this year. Were not able to do our annual open house, which is one of the items that we use for public relations. But we did host several events this year, primarily prior to COVID. But we have participated in some online events and forums. So I didn't give that 100% goal on that we missed some of those bigger events. We were also talking about hosting a community fly-in that was under promoting aviation, however, so I'll get to that item here in a minute. We were looking at doing some beautification of the building, and we had a commission for some murals on the airport terminal building. We did, as part of our budget constraining process due to COVID, put those off. And so I think that's an item we'll revisit here in the next year. Promoting aviation, I did make several presentations to local groups prior to COVID, as well as participating in a couple of online forums with Pathways to Aviation, and also with the Southwest Association of the Southwest chapter of the American Association of Airport Executives. And then the community fly-in, as you know, we did not make any progress on that. Maintaining financial stability. Our goal was to codify receipts of property taxes for the airport. We have not been able to do that as of yet, but as you know, we do have a workshop coming up with the Board of Supervisors on December 3rd for discussion of one, airport sponsorship, but also the current cooperative agreement. And so that will be an item that we will be discussing in the future. And the other item on there was increased based aircraft. We are getting there is no hangar space available on the airport at this point, and that is a result of the movement of several people relocating to Carson City. We talked about creating a database with our hangar owners on the airfield and determining vacancy, but right now everybody's got a waiting list, or they're sold. When they've had a hangar for sale, it's gone quickly. So our growth in aircraft data, I'll be updating that information here in our record here soon. We did have some current data through the end of the fiscal year that did demonstrate continued growth in our base aircraft as well as our tax revenue. And then lastly, with some administrative guidelines, I didn't accomplish all of the items on there, primarily through the fence policy has not been updated. The leasing policy has not been completed. We did not get a joint maintenance agreement with NDOT, but we do have a couple of MOUs that we were completed with the Carson City Fire Department, and we did update and publish the rates and charges, and we completed a grant policy and a purchasing policy in the last year. So those items are what we did. One of the things that we were using this was a basis of the performance of my measure of performance. I would love to have seen them all 100%. I didn't have the ability to do all of those. Some of that was out of our control due to the circumstances that we're in. But most importantly is where are we going next? And so if you look at the 5-year implementation schedule we have, year 2 had a carryover of some of the items that we're talking about, primarily marketing our property, growing based aircraft, completing or working towards the nighttime misapproach mitigation, and the feasibility study on passenger service is kind of a work in progress. But I think really it's nothing that we need to make a decision on today, but I think what we want to do is within the next few weeks is to kind of put a sight on what we as an organization think are the most critical. The ones I just named off, I believe, are on the top of that list. And I believe that some more resources and effort can be placed on some of those. I do anticipate 2021 to be a different year than 2020, but I think being in Nevada, if we're all betting men, we probably get an equal split on that call, whether it will be different or not. It's hard to say. So with that, Chair Golden, I'll turn that back over to you for follow-up.
Thank you for the summary there, Ken. Appreciate it. I'm going to only have one question for you, but I'd rather let my counterparts discuss this matter. With that in mind, since we're so far spaced apart, can I get a show of hands of who'd like to comment on it? Bradley does. Paul, do you have any comments on this? Okay. Carl, do you have anything you're going to want to add to this discussion?
Well, I'm sure that I will have some questions
Okay,
to
I'll
talk to
save
Ken
you for
about.
last. And Tim, do you have any? Yeah, I got one item, but I'm gonna defer to everybody else. Bradley, if you would start the discussion, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. First, I want to say, part of the reason I'm commenting on this and going through a little detail is I was pretty involved in the setting this up to start with and feel a little ownership for it. The second thing I want to say is that I worked on it over the weekend and I used a magnifying glass after I printed it out. And the only reason I used a magnifying glass was I didn't have a microscope in the house. So it was an eye strain exercise for sure. But I guess my general comment is you seem to be a little bit of a hard grader on yourself. And just as I go through some things, I notice things like, for example, the feasibility study for the terrain, the all-terrain runway. I think you did what we asked you to do, and that is to check the feasibility, and it turned out it didn't seem to be feasible. So I don't see that as zero. I see it as completing, meeting the expectations to run the traps. On grow airport leases, it's hard. This was one of those that we had some discussion on, and we certainly want to change the way we do it in the coming years. We did milestones in this one. In the future, I think we're just going to want to put money out there and say, get this much additional lease revenue. But it's hard for me to really grade that one. But I know there was some work done in that area, and I appreciate that. When it comes to the feasibility study on commercial passenger service, I wouldn't rate that 33%. I would just take it off the board because it's just on hold. And it was, maybe we could have looked at it. It would have been a wasted effort. And we knew that probably in March that it was going to be a wasted effort. So I don't see it as a biggie. And it could be, it could be this coming year. It's not the year for it either. I don't see it. I don't see anything like that in the coming year. Just looking at I think the monthly meetings you did well on, particularly considering the COVID impact. So I was happy with that. You've got let's see the fly-in obviously is just on hold. I wouldn't give yourself zero. I would say it was just on hold. The one disappointment, I think, the most disappointing thing for me, and this is not a disappointment in you as it is as much a disappointment in the city, but I understand they had COVID too and all this sort of thing, but it would sure been nice to get the codification under our belts. And, it's a heavy lift. I know we've got a meetings coming up with them, but sure like to get that figured out, right? And then on the administrative pieces at the bottom, there are some things you didn't get. There are also some things that we didn't have listed that you worked on, including that emergency response. And I thought that was pretty important. So those are my observations. And the other thing I want to say is, we're a little behind timing-wise, but I'd be happy to work with anybody on this if we want to put something like this together for the rest of the year.
We're going to have to put something together going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, moving right along, Paul?
Well, would this be the time to discuss adding a few items here, or would that be at another time?
I reckon you could if you want to make it, pretty concise, yeah?
Sure.
I
Okay,
think
well, let
it's
me,
close to the agenda item. Go for it.
okay. So basically, as far as, I work with Ken pretty almost on a daily basis. And I will have to say that he's done a great job at implementing a lot of this stuff and also working on these items that come up day to day. Done a that was one of the things when we put all this together. I thought that's a heavy lift, and he's really done a good job at doing those day to day operations that come up. And I'm almost a day to day operation. But I think there's two things I think that really need to be added here, and one is we're supposed to get along with the community, but I think we need to add something in here about getting along with all the users at the airport. Okay, and unfortunately, it wasn't on here, and so that needs to be added here. The other thing is also, and I've been trying to get this going for quite a while here, is just trimming and making a nice environment. We got bushes, our airport's totally overgrown, and I know that with our new personnel, we're gonna get on that, but that needs to be something. We want the airport to look good on the outside, yes, and we've got that in here, but we also need to make the airport look good from the inside of all the people flying in and out. So those are really just two things I think that need to be added here for next year. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Paul. Carl, how about you? Could you weigh in for us?
Sure. Well, I'm digesting this for the first time, doing my homework, listening to you guys, and there are things that I'll have specific questions for Ken, just to understand where we sit on these things since I was last around. But I think the comment I would add is how impressed that I am kind of coming back into this fold to see the existence of a plan like this, okay? To see the existence of measures like this against not just, our manager can evaluate himself and we can evaluate him and kind of come to the table around some known things. I mean, that in itself, I think, was a major milestone that we sought as I left my last term. But I think just the demonstration of having a strategic set of objectives and a plan that we can all sit there going, yep, we moved the needle on that one, more to do there, rethink that won't work. It just brings a professionalism and I think a level of sophistication to things so that we can all really keep track of what's important and how we're doing on it. So I just wanted to give my thanks to all of those who worked to put this together. And very nice work.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it, Carl. Tim, you sure you? Okay, I have a couple comments on this, and obviously it's a work in progress. We need to address. Perhaps in our January or February meeting, we need to update this. And Bradley, thanks for offering to take the lead on that. And Ken, don't take this as criticism. I'm just stating the facts. I want to make this real clear. Paul brought up an interesting element to the discussion that needs to be on the list here as an ongoing goal and objective, and that's maintaining good customer relations. Our tenants are our patrons. They pay the bills. They're the folks paying the rent. They're paying taxes on both their property and their aircraft. And we need to be better at customer relations. There is an old adage in the retail industry, which is where I come from. And that adage is, it's easy to lose a customer. It's hard to gain one. But the most difficult thing you'll ever do with a customer is bring them back after they're lost. And that's true in a lot of businesses. It really is. And we have some tenants, granted, they are difficult. They can be challenging. I don't deny that. Sometimes people need to be told no, and they don't like hearing no. They need to have, restrictions. Sometimes there are barriers that are put in front of people they don't like. But the reality is, I hear a lot of grievances from our tenants. And it comes with the territory. I'm sure that our group here, my counterparts, also receive criticism from our tenants. And I don't take any action about it. I generally just let it input, and that's pretty much the end of it. But we really need to make an effort to improve our customer service at the airport with our patrons, because they're the ones paying the bills. On a related matter, and this goes towards growing the number of based aircraft at the airport, I think the number has grown. I'm not sure what we as an airport authority have done to facilitate that. I think we may be the beneficiary of circumstances, which is good. No one's going to complain about growth, right? I'm just saying I think there's more demand, as Ken said, than there is supply for hangar space. I just talked to Dayton Murdoch today about the hangars he manages, and he had 4 vacancies all come up in the past few weeks. He had a wait list of 14 potential tenants. He had to call every single one of them, though, to get those 4 filled, and then he still had 1 empty. So, yes, there is demand, but that demand is not inelastic. It is elastic. And we need to keep that in mind, because customer service goes a long way with people. We want to maintain good customer service standards with our patrons. Finally, I know that there's this big list, a lot of things to chew on here, but it's really incumbent upon us as an airport authority. This is not Ken's doing, it's our doing. We need to ensure that we start leasing out more land for development. We have that land available on the airport. The only way we can really truly grow our customer base and grow our rental revenue is by leasing more land. We need to do that. There is a process, obviously, that we're working on with an appraisal of available land to see where we can go to market with it. And that is it's in process. And I acknowledge that needs to be a top priority. We can't be kicking that can down the road another year. So that needs to be something that this airport authority acts on and gets that, ball in motion, so that we can go to market and say, okay, we have this land available for people to build hangars. Here's the rent. There's no question out there. And then we can see, is there really demand for that? Because that is a source of revenue that we're just not, incremental revenue that we're not tapping into. The last ground lease signed at this airport was, oh goodness gracious, Steve, do you remember?
2017,
When was it?
December 2017. That was the one that we signed with, the airport authority signed with Sierra Skyway that became Mountain View Condo Association.
Okay.
Now, the other leases have been like an amendment to
Right.
Tri-Motor. And
I'm
an
saying
amendment to
new
Mays
leases.
lease and
Yeah.
then,
What
of
about
course-
Gian Greco?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's the one. That's
So
the
he
one
so
I'm
he was the
referring to.
last one. And,
That was 2017?
Yes, December 2017.
and so that was 3 years ago.
Right.
And he gave back at least half that land.
Yeah, he gave 2/3 back, 66,000.
Two-thirds, yeah,
He
two-thirds.
leased 90,000 plus square feet, he gave back about 66,000.
So he gave back 2/3 of that from 3 years ago. And the one before that, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, was Jet Ranch.
I think that's correct.
And that was easily 13, 14, maybe even 15 years ago. So we got some work to do. Just want to, again, I'm not being a critic.
No,
I'm just saying that I don't want to see this be the lost opportunity that keeps getting pushed off due to something that's considered a higher priority. This should be the priority because that's the way we're going to generate additional revenue.
Is our biggest problem with this right now a process-related one where, hi, we have a product. Yes, I'm interested in your product. How much does it cost? Well, we'll have to get back to you on that. There's a big involved, never mind. Is that where we are, that we can't actually publicize based on the methods we have to use to do appraisals and fair market? And is that what's holding us up at this point? Where we can't?
Yes and no. We took action a couple of meetings ago to bring on an appraiser to get an appraisal of the land so we have a rate that we can go to market with. By doing that, we're not just shooting a scattergun, at the public saying, come on in. But at the same time, we haven't really done any outreach to lease any of that ground. And there is some good land available, some of which already has improvements on it or improvements in utilities to the property line. And to me, that's a great value. If you can lease that and someone's already done the work of bringing the utilities to the property, that's a lot of money right there that somebody gets to benefit from. A lot of work that doesn't need to be done. The issues are, there is a process. Part of it is the appraisal, and we went down the right road, in my opinion, authorizing this appraisal to be done so that we have kind of a base rate. We can answer the question, here's what the cost is. I think we probably should have gotten the ball rolling a lot faster on that.
Could I make a comment on one of your comments? Yeah, one of your points, which is a good one, and that is on the, if you will, customer satisfaction piece. And before I took my current role as at the DMV, I had the opportunity to work. I'm working at the DMV, man. Yep. So I am the HR guy at the DMV. So. Oh, DMV, yeah. No, it's not that bad, actually. But the consulting job I had just before that was with I'll call them a pseudo-pharmaceutical firm. And when I went to work for them to find out what some of their internal issues were and that sort of thing, I kept hearing from the salespeople and from customer service people and everything how much the customers just hate the company. And they don't like the customer service, and they don't like the products, and they don't like anything about this company. And it was kind of like, why don't you just close the doors? And so I talked them into doing a true customer satisfaction survey, first with their 100 largest customers, and then with a random selection of their middle section of customers. And the results came back absolutely freaking glowing about this company. And of course, the reason they got all the negativity was the customers only talk to the salespeople or call the customer service department when things are lousy. When things are working fine, they don't need a sales guy, they don't need a customer service rep. So what I don't want to do when it comes to the customer service aspect of the airport management is operate on anecdotal evidence, okay? Just what this company was doing, and we found out that it's actually the strength and not the weakness of the organization. So what I'd like to suggest is that we put together something along the lines of a SurveyMonkey approach to sending a question every year to every year at the same time of the year to everybody on the airport and say, would you please rate not only our airport manager, would you rate our airport board? Would you rate our maintenance staff? And would you rate them on, yes, customer service, availability, that kind of stuff, but also would you rate them on these things: infrastructure, safety and security, economic activity, community relations, promoting aviation, and financial stability. And to give us a real sense, and that'll give us a benchmark that we can then measure ourselves, everybody, including this board, measure ourselves against year after year.
Bradley, you bring up a good point. People have a propensity to complain but never compliment. I don't disagree with that. I have an idea or two I'll talk to you about offline, not tonight, of how to improve the customer relations. That's really what I'm talking about, is customer relations, tenant relations with patrons.
I just think we want to know what they are, rather than, I mean, you're only going to hear complaints. That's
Oh,
the nature of humanity.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to know what our customers think, and then when we see weaknesses, we'll know exactly what to work on.
Like I said, I'll talk to you offline about something.
I'd like to talk about that a little bit as far as anecdotal evidence. Well, I get a lot of that. Okay, being at the airport, being on the board, being here and there. So I think your idea of a survey is a great idea, to kind of quantify it, rather. But it's out there, and we need help, and we need improvement with our customers, because right now there's a lot of complications now with the people at the airport, and that needs to be resolved.
Fair enough. Tim, anything else you want to add?
I'll just kind of comment in addition with Paul. Paul and I are on the airport a lot. We do hear a lot of comments. Yeah, we hear all the griping and all the dissatisfaction, but I would love to see a survey. I think it'd be marvelous to have something. I'd like to be involved in the verbiage of that if possible, because Paul and I we can address some things from that because we talk to them every day. And I think that would be a positive way to address things on a very positive basis, because I think that we're all interested in improving our game.
And I think getting the language right is key.
Yeah,
And I could not do that by myself.
Sure. So I'm fully on board with that. Thank you very much for bringing it up.
So let me make a suggestion here. This was really more of a discussion item than anything else. We're not adopting anything this evening. So let me make a suggestion. Bradley, you offered to kind of carry the load on this. Let's, it shouldn't be a violation of the open meeting law if we each give Bradley input without discussion. Would that be correct, Steve?
My suggestion would be to give that input to the airport manager, let the airport manager in turn work with Bradley to develop that.
Okay, everybody clear on that? Okay, and then I'll talk to you offline about something. Okay, thank you, Ken, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 5, which I was really looking forward to this one. Discussion and possible action to direct the airport manager to complete a contract to purchase and install runway web camera with Nevada Security Company. Ken, it's all yours. Just tell us what it cost.
It's always about the cost. Thank you, Chair Golden. This came up in part of our strategic planning discussions, was to have a webcam on the airport. And as we looked at the webcam, we tried to figure out what the objective was going to be. Is it just so that somebody could go online and they could see what the current conditions are in the airport? And I saw that example at several airports. Truckee is a good example of that. But what I became more interested in as I had further discussion was what takes place on the runway, as well as being able to get current conditions. As a uncontrolled airfield, when there's an incident and somebody comes to me and tries to describe something that may have occurred on that airport, or I find an airplane that had run off the runway, then you're going back and trying to piece together what occurred. And I think as part of our strategic goal of safety and security of our airport users, there's some real value in having a webcam based at the best location that we've talked about is at the self-serve fuel island. I've had several conversations with Chair Golden about that. There's power available, there's the clear line of sight, which is available from there, and as well as internet service. And now, when we say webcam, that doesn't mean it has to be live on our webpage, for one. I just want to clarify the distinction. It can be, but it doesn't mean that it has to be. When we say webcam, it just means that it's uploaded to the cloud, it's the data is saved on the cloud, and it's accessible via the cloud. So that's what we're really talking about. The inability to have it connect to a fiber network does cause some minor challenge to that, but it's not over insurmountable. And so I had several different providers come out and give us a quote and to look at it from a different angle. And I did come across one of the recommended companies. They've changed their name since the Nevada Security Company. It was different when I first contacted them. Long story short is that we can get real-time video of both the runway conditions, but also the operations, and be able to archive that video of not just the runway, but it also pick up the parallel taxiways which are around the runway. And so with that available to us, I think we enhance our airport safety and security. We can get real-time conditions, so if there's a snowstorm in progress prior to getting out of the airport, or coming to the airport, be able to look at that and be able to monitor weather conditions, but also to use it for archive data. This item is also, I'm proposing in conjunction with the next item, and if you'd like me to discuss that first, take any questions, I can do any of those items.
Quite candidly, I'd rather see this as a separate item, and you'll see why when we discuss the next item. Okay, that's just my opinion, but that's kind of where we're going with it.
No, that's fine. I just made a mention of it in the board memo, and I didn't know if you want me to tie
Yeah, let's
tie those
let's
two
keep
ends
this
together.
separate. This is an easy item. As far as I'm concerned, $2,500, $2,600 for this is an absolute bargain. I've offered to donate the space on top of the sign out at the self-serve, which is the highest point. It's probably 20 to 25 feet AGL there. It's at least 20. It's probably 25 feet above ground. We can get a panoramic view of the runway environment. Maybe I don't know if it'll rotate at all, Ken.
The proposal he has is actually 3 cameras tied
Okay.
together. So one pointed at each end and then the runway center.
Okay, so yeah, you'll get great views. I've informed Ken, please use that, pylon. If you need to go bigger, higher, go bigger, higher. Anything the airport wants, we'll donate, to it and make it happen. All that we ask on our end is that our internet signal isn't interrupted by this. We do have internet out there, but it's used for the credit card processing. So that's kind of important. So someone needs to figure out the technical side of this, and I'm sure Councilor Takis is going to want to enter into an agreement with our organization for this. So I can say, there's no economic benefit. I've offered to just give this to the airport, if you will, that, please use our facilities. And therefore, I don't have a conflict of interest. I'm all for it, 110%. That's where I'll leave it.
And as far as the internet connection, we can have a separate internet connection. We don't have to piggyback onto that. And we can also install a separate meter if that became an issue. So I think a memorandum of understanding between the two parties would be
It's up to Councilor Takis what we do. And I don't think a separate meter will be necessary if there's any significant increase in electrical bills, and we have 15 years of history. If we see any significant increase, we'll let the airport know. If it's $1 or $2 a month, I think we can contribute that for the good of the airport. So, comments from Airport Authority members on this matter? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I've been advocating this with Ken for a while now, and it's finally happening, so I'm 100%. There's a 100% with this, and there's a whole lot of good reasons, but I don't think I really need to go over them all.
Carl, you're a frequent user. What do you feel?
Well, Ken just had me calling him, texting him the 2 weeks ago with the snow, right? Because we had a NOTAM in there for what was expected to be a closed runway for a while. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't see it. I have no idea, but I'm going to drive down there and I'm going to see. And as is often the case, the sun comes out, it burns off, and we're good. This is like such a no-brainer. The only thing on my mind is like, wait a minute, why weren't we doing this like 8 years ago? So I'm overjoyed to see this on the agenda.
Bradley?
I know when I'm out of my area of expertise. I'm going to listen to the rest of you.
So this is above your pay grade? Yes. Okay. Tim?
As a frequent user, I'm 100% behind this. Regarding access to the data I would certainly want to have that access available to users, whether it's on our ADF, published with our user information.
On our webpage, yeah.
Regardless, whether you want to put in the website or not, that's not important, but as the users and people that want to go in and look at our data for our airport, that's where you want to have it. And I'm 100% for both reasons, for weather and for incidents monitoring. I think it's fabulous and it's cheap. So, yes.
And Steve, I'm going to ask for your input on this matter, in just in case there's a legal issue with the arrangement that's being proposed, and what your opinion is as a pilot and aircraft owner and tenant on the airport.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with it from a legal standpoint. Other airports do it. The one limitation is you can typically only see the weather on the ground. You can't really see what it might be right above the airport. But that's still very valuable information because if the weather is lousy on the ground, you probably don't want to go there no matter what it is, 400 or 500 feet above it. From a legal standpoint, I really don't see a liability issue here. It's anybody standing there could see the same thing. So it's not like we're publishing private or protected information of any sort. Yeah, I think this is a really good idea, the video idea.
One recommendation I'll make here for Ken before I ask for a motion and on the matter. If you haven't already done so, Ken, look at Truckey's webcam. Okay, because Steve pointed something out about not being able to see the surrounding area. Truckey's webcam, you can see, heck, if the Carson Range wasn't in the way, you'd be able to see down here. You can see their webcam, once you click on it to activate it, it rotates 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. So it rotates, but it stops every 90 degrees. So maybe it does north, west, south, and then east. You can see clear on out to, past Verdi. You can see past Crystal Peak. You can see the Pacific Crest. You can see North Star. You can see the Carson Range and Mount Rose, all of it clear as day. And this is in addition to the runway environment. I've seen others. That one just happens to be a phenomenal asset, and everybody who uses it loves it because, if they're coming in from out of the area, they got to cross the Pacific Crest. They click on it and look, and whoa, it's clear. Okay, well, that's great. Or holy smokes, it's a blizzard. Just an FYI, that whoever did that one did a good job with it. So,
If I might add one subject of consideration when we set up, if we go forward with this, and set up the non-live piece, which is the archive and the recording. Without getting into a recommendation on what the period of retention should be, there should be a stated, documented period of retention. Now, I know this is Mr. Takis's field of expertise, but we have information that in the event of a dispute, lawsuit, civil action, federal regulation violation, is going to be discoverable. And what you want to be able to say is, I'm sorry, what was that date? Sure, we have that. Or what was that date? Nope, that's beyond our period of destruction. So you don't get into the morass of a very expensive, well, you don't say you don't have it, so let's get the server, let's do the thing. So I think that that's just best practice, whatever that period of retention is, to state it, document it, and have it formalized.
I think that's,
And then to do it.
I think that's a
Then to do
great
it.
point. And is my prior lifetime as an air traffic controller, we kept recordings for 15 days. And then the only time that something remained beyond that is if there was an incident, then that recording would be flagged indefinitely until at such time it was no longer deemed significant. So there is a recommendation on the estimate that includes 3, 7, and 30 days. Obviously, I would propose that we do a 15-day, which is something similar to an ATC record retention policy, and I think that that's very.
I think
adequate.
15 days is more than
Yeah.
adequate.
And if something occurs during that
Because
time,
it's not, the intent here is not for surveillance purposes. The intent here
correct.
is to provide users of the airport real-time conditions. And so that you're aware at other airports, and I don't know, I'm not a tech guy. I'll be the first to tell you that, just like you said, this is over your pay grade. At other airports, the way the webcams work is they're inactive until someone clicks on the link. And then clicking on the link activates it, and it starts moving around and showing what's going on. So, again, it's for the user. How this ends up, I don't know, but I'm in favor of it regardless.
I will just say that part of the reason for this also is to kind of look at incidents at the airport and that type of thing. And so anything, if we want to get more views, we stay away from the rotating cameras because we don't want anything missed. So if we want more views, more cameras.
Yeah, I'll just jump on that. I would, from my point of view, the 3-camera idea is great, running 24 hours and cycling after whatever days we feel is enough storage, because that's going to give us the kind of information as a user, as a pilot, as well as incidents. That gives the best overall value.
And I will add, I think the fewer days, the better, because for this very reason, what you said, this is not a surveillance system. And if I was a user at the airport, I'd like to know that there's not some server somewhere, from 3 years ago that shows my tail numbers. So the shorter, the better from my standpoint.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion for this matter to approve the completion of a contract to purchase and install runway webcam as proposed by Nevada Security Company.
I move.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to direct the airport manager to complete a contract to purchase and install a runway webcam with Nevada Security Company. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Going to move on to item number 6, possible discussion, possible action. Direct the airport manager to complete a contract to purchase and install Invisible Intelligence CTAF general audio recording device.
Thank you, Chair Golden. This reason I mentioned that this dovetails with the webcam is that the recording of a CTAF provides us an additional layer of safety and security for our airport users. I can recall an incident that just occurred within the last 2 weeks where Member Hamilton was on final for runway 9er and a OB-10 Bronco was on final for 27. And I was listening to CTAF and I heard Member Hamilton making calls in the blind and were not being answered by the pilot. And then ultimately The pilot did turn up the frequency and was online. But that's just an anecdotal example of occurrences that happen, I don't want to say frequently, but do occur, where there is some breakdown in communication, and by being able to go back and review, you are able to ascertain what happened. This particular technology came out of an incident back east, where an airport manager and this gentleman who designed the system were having this discussion. It was a fatal accident, and they were unable to reconstruct it at that time. And the epiphany was, well, gee, if we had a way to have recorded that, we could have figured out what happened. And usually, it's not so much as to find blame, but able to enhance safety for future incidents. When you can bring somebody in and listen to a tape, a lot of times it triggers something that they have basically wiped out in their mind. I, as an air traffic controller, numerous times have listened to audio recordings post-incident, post-accident, and was surprised to hear certain things that took place, whether it was on the frequency or on the interphone, that you just didn't recall at that time. It's not so much for a gotcha as it is to enhance and improve safety, but the other benefit that this has is it can assist in traffic count. So they've created an algorithm that and this is based upon non-ADS-B equipped aircraft, which as a Class C airport, we do have several still. That's going to change over time, so it's not like this is the linchpin to the whole system. But the algorithm has made some determination that roughly an aircraft arriving in an uncontrolled airport makes approximately 4 to 6 calls on frequency, and based upon a certain number of transmissions that you can count one airplane. So it's just another way to back up some of the information that we are getting from other sources. We do have a ADS-B receiver in outside the building. We're able to get real-time video of aircraft tracking. We're working on developing the reporting criteria out of that. But to me, it's an added bonus to be able to do that. Now, this is a one-time purchase contract, includes the software as well as the hardware. You can purchase a 15% of the total amount maintenance agreement for ongoing support and equipment maintenance. But it is a low bar for entry. It is designed for airports like ours. It does only record a single frequency. And I think it's an enhancement to the airport that once you tie it together with the video, you've got a full system. Generally, at a controlled airport, you obviously got eyeballs looking out the windows and observing activity on the movement area, but then you also have the audio recording as a backup. Well, this kind of gives us that two-prong approach to enhancing safety at our airport. I think it's a great addition. I think the monies that we're talking about here are something that's certainly within our budget, and I think we'd benefit from it. There are other services out there. For example, Live ATC is another service where airports across the country, they have recordings of obviously from controlled airports, but non-controlled airports, you do have to purchase equipment. It has to be maintained on the field. This just kind of takes that step out, but it doesn't put our audio calls on the internet, for one. So that's my feedback, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Well, Ken, I don't have any questions. I have some comments, but I'd like to hear from everybody else first. Tim, we'll start with you. What do you have to say about this?
What's the cost again, Ken?
The out-of-pocket cost is roughly, it's below $4,500, but just when you get into shipping, I want to get an exact quote, so I estimated at $4,500. The 2-year maintenance agreement is approximately a 1-year maintenance agreement is $600 a year, and that includes maintenance on the hardware and software as well as customer support.
Okay. Didn't you also discuss with me, we were discussing possibly eliminating some expenses because of these new recordings and new features?
That's correct. And last year, we were looking at a variety of systems to get ADSB information, but we also try to dovetail it with some marketing information.
Right.
And so the airport authority purchased a one-year subscription to JetNet LLC. And JetNet LLC provides us our traffic count our traffic data that you see in the back of our report, but we also got some direct mailing data and addresses that we use for our direct marketing. Now, that's something that just went out in September. And we've had a couple, 3 inquiries. I had one request for some more detailed information just last week. But I did realize that this is just anecdotal to JetNet LLC. I didn't time that mailing very well because it went out during political season. So it was probably in there with the rest of the political mailings. But I have saved the, excuse me. I have archived data of those mailing lists, so we'll be able to do that again. So my proposal was that we weren't going to renew that system this year. That was coming up for renewal in December, and that with our current ADSB tracking, I'm working on how to get regular reports out of that. I think that our direct mail prospects will be able to continue for the next year with the data that we have and mine that list.
Well, that's what I was, from our previous conversations with yourself and Paul and myself, that seems perfectly acceptable to me. And because we're saving a significant amount of money there, this is a no-brainer to me as well, and I support this direction. Thank you.
Bradley, do you want to opine on this?
I'll just repeat my, not qualified to even ask a question.
Paul?
I've been actually advocating this also, mainly from a viewpoint of trying to get more safety at our airport. Now, I don't know how, if we should get into this, but how many people have almost had multiple mid-airs at Carson? Raise your hand. Okay. How many have had one in the last month? A mid-air? Almost. Okay. So, of course, the problem with mid-airs is that afterwards, it's always he said, she said. And I mean, and of course, I might even be the most guilty myself. However, I've worked with this with South Tahoe, the recording. I've worked with it with Minden. It always gets rid of all questions. It's there. And that's why I think it's a great asset to our airport. Now, I haven't looked into the exact product here, but as far as safety for our airport, I think it's going to be a big help. And so those are my comments.
Carl?
So I guess 2 questions. One, to understand a little bit more about who would have access to those recordings, and I guess it kind of goes back to the video, and as you said, it dovetails a bit. Who would have access to those recordings, under what circumstances, and for how long? Because the understanding I have is that this is for the use of the airport staff, for us, I don't know. So I'd be interested to learn more about that. And then number 2, in what way is the video and the audio capture correlated? So do the 2 systems have a common time code, and are they synced so that you actually can get this robust picture of what's going on and what's being said in sync time?
Those are great questions, and Carl, I'll answer them this way. I believe we can sync the time. They're not, these 2 pieces of equipment aren't made by the same people, and they aren't proposed for the same purpose. We'd be taking independent systems, but by using a date time clock and the method to set it, I believe we can get that. The retention, this is an airport authority piece of equipment. It's not something, live ATC, for example, right now, you can go down and listen to a frequency at any point in time. I'm not necessarily proposing that or against it. That's strictly, I think those are hobbyists who do that, just like listen to a police scanner. But my idea is saving it is similar, short duration, a week, 2 weeks. If something happens, somebody's going to come to you right away. And generally, I won't say with 100% certainty, but I'll give you a great example. When we were doing the runway project, we closed down at 6 p.m. And at 10 minutes after 6, an aircraft reported inbound landing Carson City. So I knew two things. One, he didn't read the NOTAMs, and two, he did not listen to the AWAS because that information was on both. And it could have been an incident. At that time, we were in the process of putting the X's up. It could have gotten to a situation. Thank God we're monitoring the frequency and we can reach out. But my point being is that that's something that where you have data later and you can come back to somebody and say, hey, look, this is just an educational piece. Let me share this with you. And I think that could be helpful in flight training. So if Paul had a student and said, hey, let's go back and listen to this on frequency and figure out, if there's something to be learned from this. And that's something I think would be acceptable to utilize equipment for, to be sharing that information. It also helps us in the aspect if I've got my maintenance man is out on the airfield and something occurs and he didn't report himself being in a particular position, and there's a way to use that for training on our end too. So it eliminates the ambiguity by having that data. And in the end, it could save the airport considerable angst if there was an incident and it was being reported by somebody in one direction, but now you bring out the hard evidence and it actually is something totally different. So I think that it does protect the airport from some liability in that respect. The second piece, I think, was the recording retention. I'll look more into that. I think it's saved on the hard drive, and so we could be able to set up, I'm not sure if there's a method in the program to go in there and delete it after a certain period unless you save it for a particular incident. I'll look into that. But it would be limited to the airport authority's use. Of course, if there was an incident, it could be discoverable in any legal action. I do want to say I reached out to several airports. For one, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation purchased like 26 of these systems for uncontrolled airports in their state. And Alaska also is a big user of this system, and they swear by it, how it's improved the safety at their airport just because they have access to data and protects the airport from harm.
Just a comment on the audio and video. I would like to see a policy that spells out who has access to it, and particularly what it takes for it to be released. And I would say that should be a court order. And the reason I say that is I've lived in Carson City long enough to know that if you have a camera that records your parking lot or the front of your building or something like that, the sheriff's office will show up on a regular basis asking for tape because they think maybe they could have a clue to something, and it will drive you crazy. So, that's the sheriff's office doing their job. I understand that, but when there are lawsuits, there's all kinds of stuff, and I think we should just make it really clear this is how someone accesses this outside of the airport leadership.
Boy, Bradley, just a fantastic comment. Thank you. Folks, I'm going to be the contrarian here. Has nothing to do with cost. I think the intent is good, but it's also a slippery slope, and I can't support it, and I'll tell you why. I have seen these systems be used for all the wrong reasons, in particular, tracking aircraft. Then it starts with this person was doing that. This person flew over my house. I want to know who it was. This person's airplane was really loud. this person, was circling over this area and I don't like it. This person took off at 5:30 in the morning. I have seen these systems be used for all the wrong reasons. And I'll tell you what happens when that occurs. You think this is a safety benefit. When people know that they're under surveillance, they figure out a way to no longer be under surveillance. You will have fewer people communicating on Unicom if we put this in. That's number one. Number two, unknown to many, the FAA has a program for privacy. It's called LADD, LAD. Carl, you're shaking your head. You must know about it. Yeah. You see, when ADSB went live January 1st, people said, I just don't want everybody under the sun tracking me. And so you can block your ADSB output to everybody, every single vendor that has that data gets blocked. The only people who can see it are air traffic control and other aircraft, and they won't see your tail number. They'll only see you as a target because people don't want to be under constant surveillance. And that's what this will turn into. It'll turn into a surveillance tool. The intent may be good today. The cost may be a low barrier to entry. You may think there's some safety features. But when people stop talking on the Unicom because they don't want to be surveilled, it becomes a safety negative. And you may say, gee, Michael's all out to lunch. I have flown with people who literally turn off their transponder when they are not in controlled airspace because they don't want to be surveilled. They haven't signed up for the LAD program yet to block their tail number. But I know people personally who I have flown with that if they're not in ruled airspace, ruled under ADSB, they turn off the transponder. Perfectly legal, nothing wrong with it. And this is an uncontrolled airport. There is nothing wrong whatsoever with landing at this airport and making not a single communication. There's nothing illegal about it. Perfectly legal. We will have people doing that. There's no doubt in my mind that will be occurring here. And it like I said, the portrayal of it adding to safety is offset by those who don't want to be surveilled. And once they know they're being recorded, you're going to have people that they will call something out. Someone like me, I may not want to be recorded. It's perfectly legal for me to say low-wing aircraft left base 27 and not use my call sign. So food for thought, I can't support a audio surveillance program for just that reason. And Steve, you wanted to add something to this conversation?
Yeah, I have two things. One that's geared toward, if you go forward, some suggestion, because I see some legal issues. But the other one is just to I guess, put some details around your last comment. We have had in the past issues with pilots who are trying to skirt the rules. And this will be another way to do that. And candidly, the pilots that you're going to have problems with are the ones who are trying to skirt the rules. You're going to have plenty of other pilots who, irrespective of whether they're being recorded or not, are going to announce because they know that's the right thing to do. But when you have the real problem people, if you're trying to catch that, you're probably not going to catch it because they'll figure it out. But my other comment was, if you look at the specs of this product, it's you're basically buying a notebook computer that's running on Windows 8. Windows 8, Microsoft stopped supporting Windows 8 in 2018, and they did their general stop of support. They're going to completely stop supporting it in 18 months. So if you're going to buy a product, this one is already obsolete. And what that indicates to me is this is a very questionable vendor who's trying to sell you some stuff that is essentially already obsolete. And so if you do go down this path, I would strongly suggest that you find a vendor that's at least using current software and hardware, because this doesn't look right. Plus, it raises the question of if you're looking for some kind of recording device, why do you need to buy a notebook computer from these people? And I don't know anything about this company. I didn't research the company, but that stuff just jumped right out at me when I looked at the specs of the product that they were selling. And I see that as a potential legal problem because I see that as something that will become obsolete very soon. Now, the related question, which Member Harris brought up, which I think is a great one, which is on anything that you're collecting, we need to have a policy for how it's going to be treated, how long it's going to be kept, because this is a different product. From the way I've heard the description, this is a product that's for the benefit of the airport staff who may in turn use it or make it available to others for educational purposes or other kinds of purposes. And that's different than the webcam. The webcam is out there for pretty much anybody to use, and that's, primarily the pilot base are the ones who are going to probably be using it the most, but certainly it could be used by staff, it could be used by anybody. So I see that as a very different thing than the audio recordings. And then there's always the issue that you set timeframes, but if there's a way for people to monitor it continuously and build their own database, they will probably do that. Case in point, look at TikTok. I mean, we've all heard about it in the news. It all runs through Chinese servers. And despite their claim that, oh, China's never asked us for this information, it's a bunch of bunk because it's Chinese owned and every Chinese owned company has mandatorily access to the Communist Party in China. So we're in a new world where we have to think about how data is used and accessed and how we're going to set those policies to make sure that we don't become part of a bigger problem. And so the policy issue on retention and access is really important. That's something that would need to be developed. I'm not here to say pro or con. That's not my role on the audio recording or the video recording. But I am telling you, I'm seeing more legal issues with the audio than I do with the video.
Thank you, Steve.
I'd like to dovetail on that a little bit. Just thank you for pointing that out, Steve. I'm looking at the copyright of this material. It's dated 2013, so I'm sure that they're not going to be selling a product that is going to be outdated, and I certainly can verify that. The other piece is CTAF is public domain information. ADSB is public domain. You can block your sign, but once that data goes into the FAA database, that data is publicly available. For example, if you look through our JetNet LLC report, you will see that there's no block call signs. And that's because once that data is canned, it's now part of the public domain. You can go into a FOIA request and make those requests. Under noise complaints, the airport authority has responsibility for airport noise. That's who noise falls to. So if there's a neighbor that calls us at the end of the runway and says, hey, this guy took off at 5:30 in the morning, my response generally is, the airport's a 24/7 public use airport. But that doesn't mean that we don't look into reports from the public, whether it's about noise or unsafe flying or other activities. Now, we're not going to prevent the bad actors. And I don't know if I concur with your assessment that just because I have a radio doesn't mean I won't use it because I don't want to be recorded. That to me is just a little bit beyond my normal understanding of how people operate. Yes, you could drop the call sign, and a lot of people do. I've seen that in pilot education videos where they teach to say, you're the red low wing or the tail dragger on final or whatever. I've seen that. However, There's people that operate our airport now without a radio. For example, there's a Super Cub on the airfield that I've asked the guy to get a handheld just for his safety. I think it is safer, especially if he's doing stop and goes and those kind of activities on the airport, that he has some ability to communicate. All the things that we've talked about this airport, increasing our aircraft, based aircraft, building new hangars, the mixture of jets and props and high performance, low performance. I think it's imperative on our part to do the best we can to enhance safety. And enhancing safety also means incident accident investigation. And not having the tools to investigate is not a good idea. But ensuring that the tools and the policies reflect what we think are good ideas should go hand in hand. I concur with that as well. Retention policies, how the information can be released and whatnot. Somebody had the same question about the new gate access control system. Oh, will you be able to tell who comes in? Well, yes. Is that private? No, you're entering a public use airport. We've given you permission to enter the airport. We have the right to know who comes in when, and it's not used just for the purposes of entertainment. It's used for the purposes to determine if an incident occurs, that do we have information to go back, i.e. somebody runs into the gate. Somebody takes out a taxiway light. Somebody takes out a PAPI, a sign. Those are incidents that if they're not been reported to us, it's incumbent upon us to know what occurred and when. And when we have the tools to do that, then we can find out if an incident or accident took place. Great example was just last week when there was a forced landing off airport. Did not have any data to support that communication, but we did have data from the ADSB that we could go back and see exactly what happened and where they ended up. And that data was helpful. And so those pieces, this is not a gotcha moment, but it is a moment that where when we look at our airport, the complexity of the airport, the single runway, mixture of aircraft, these are tools that I think we need to ensure safety going in the future. So I concur with the policy. I concur with, of course, ensuring the equipment that we're buying is up to date. We are buying, yes, it is a laptop. It is, the objective is to be able to store the data on the laptop. It's not an offsite cloud service. And the question or the conversations I've had both with the director of ADOT for Alaska and for Massport, and talking to airport managers, they love it. And I think it's an enhancement for the airport.
Well, thanks, Ken. And I just want to reiterate, your intent is good. That's not the issue I have here. As I said when I started my opinion on the matter, I view it as a slippery slope. Your intent today is great. What it turns into in the future, Lord only knows. And I've seen these things used for all the wrong reasons after they've been established. So,
And I think that's right. And I think that's why the policy is important.
yeah,
I agree with you.
And so on that note, it's really up to the airport authority members to make a decision on this and to either support it or not. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you about the data being used for the wrong reasons. And however, I could simply, at my house, put a radio, put a recorder, I could record that data just as easy as anybody else and with absolutely no cost and on my computer. So recording it from the airport, doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. I could do that right now. In fact, I was even thinking of doing that when I couldn't get Ken to fork over the system. So as far as the audio recording, that's pretty much public information.
It is. But nobody's going to go to that extent. I should say few.
No, I
will go
know.
to that. Very few will go to the extent of buying a scanner and then hooking it up to their computer to record it. Do people listen to live ATC? Sure they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, people
I mean,
do.
It's just a handheld radio
Yeah, sure,
and
people do.
into a computer.
But
Mark,
it's not a recording. That's the difference. It's big difference when you start recording that data.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment too when you're done.
Go ahead, Tim.
This is the best part about being part of a board with people thinking from different hats. Being an attorney, automatically you're gonna look at all the unintended consequences. I can see that very well, and I completely agree with you. I also have to admit, being a pilot that flies regularly, I make mistakes every now and then. I was pointed out last week, I was making a right downwind runway 9, but I called out right downwind runway 27 out of just habit. But my fellow pilot said, hey, man, that was the poor call out. It's like, oh, yeah, well, that could have caused problems. I do want to, my comment is this. Number one, the hardware is not an issue with me. That's an easy solution. That's old, as you said, old marketing information. That's not a problem for me. Unintended consequences is real. I completely agree. However, I feel that the value outweighs the unintended consequences, and that's just the way I do business. That's all it is. I could be wrong down the road, but I feel that the value outweighs the risk, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay. Well, maybe we could have see if there's a motion, see if this is going anywhere. Tim, you were pretty, put it out there. Maybe you want to put out a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this particular purchase to purchase this audio recording system.
Could I make a request that
Yes, sir.
you state what the purpose of the system is? Because our ability to limit the use of the data is going to be tied to what the purpose of the approval is.
Could you kind of clarify that,
Well,
Ken?
you know what? Hold on a second.
I was just
'Cause
curious, is this
we're-
going to be a motion, a second, if there is one, and then discussion? Because I was kind of going to go that direction as to,
Yeah, I'm gonna make a suggestion here, okay? Because there is an inherent problem here. It's a cart before the horse problem. I'm gonna make a suggestion that we're in November, in January, we come back with a policy for what we would use this for, and then make a decision on the equipment. There is no reason to rush this with haste. The big issue is, what's the data being used for?
Yeah,
And
let me add.
Bradley brought that up. It's an
Let me
excellent
add that we
point.
could actually address the policy in the motion, and that would touch on Steve's concern. I also like the idea of getting updated marketing information. If we're gonna, spend some money, let's find out what that looks like, and there may be other options that you find, Ken, you like better. And the other thing is we're missing a couple of members probably because of the scheduling on Monday. And we can maybe have everybody here in January. And I just think that, and we might even come up with some more thoughts in the meantime. But I don't think 2 months is going to hurt too much. And I do think, I don't know what you think about the video side of things. It seems like people are more comfortable with that, and maybe we want a motion just on the video.
I fully support that approach. I think that's great. Let's get more time, get more information.
Okay, so what we'll do is in January, if Paul and Carl, you're in agreement on this, we'll come up with a data retention policy.
yeah, I mean, I think that in conjunction with the matter we just approved on the webcam, we're going to need to approve before we turn on the recording, what that data retention, I would say it would be highly advised, you're the chair. That we get that in place, and that would be good timing to have this conversation as well. I mean, there are interesting questions that kind of, in my mind, tie to the customer service, customer satisfaction aspect of this, knowing just a little bit about our operators and tenants. I mean, on the one hand, this is, as many have said already, completely public domain information. Yeah, there is no right to privacy when you're broadcasting on the public frequencies this way, and that includes recording. There's something a little different around who is recording it. And in this case, it's the airport authority and the airport staff. And so it just will cause a question that we would be wrong to ignore around, and it's a legitimate one from our users, and why. And I think that's what you're getting at. And I think it would be, I'm surprised, to be honest, that there aren't more public comments around this subject. And I would want to make sure that for that reason, that there was awareness that this is being talked about. And I think this is one of those places where we have it everywhere, dead to rights, that we can take action and go and do this. This is probably one that we will feel better, and our users will feel better on the backside knowing about proactively and having, I think, a role in that conversation, because there are strong opinions about things like this.
Let me try to then summarize this. We will come up with a policy of data retention for consideration in our January meeting. I'll work with Counselor Takis on that and with our airport manager, Ken Moen. Three of us will come up with intent and language for an acceptable policy to bring before the airport authority. Then we can make a determination what we're doing with a voice recording device. Does that sound about right to everybody? Okay, fair enough. We'll move on from that item over to the airport engineer's report.
I think we have Chris Knox on the line. Chris, can you hear us? Yep, there he is. Chris Knox, our consulting engineer with Armstrong Associates.
You're muted, Chris.
Desi, is Chris muted on his end, or is there some reason we can't hear Chris?
Yeah, he's not muted on our end.
Chris, we can't hear you. Chris, we see your lips moving, but we can't hear you.
Ken, if we can't resolve this pretty quickly, we'll just have you read the report or refer to it.
I'm not sure Chris is hearing us either. Chris, we didn't hear anything you said, and I'm not hearing you now. Okay. Well, sorry, Chris. I appreciate you staying up for the meeting, but we're not able to pick you up on this this connection. I'll address Chris's report right now. Briefly, as you know, we have the two grant projects ongoing at this moment, perimeter fence project and including the gate access control. Currently, they are working in several areas simultaneously. They just set posts down the taxiway Bravo area between us and the through the fence area to the east of Bravo. And they've been doing some clearing down by the homes on Apollo Way. We did have a minor change to the plan down on that area. As you know, there's some homes that back up to airport property there, and there's some existing cattle fence that's between the two, and it's most of the tenant or the neighbors have connected their fence onto that fence. So in lieu of going in and tearing all that down, and for another reason, there's some telephone poles and with cable and NV Energy power, or power poles, I should say, instead of telephone poles, that run along that property line as well. And in order to ensure access for the utility, we're going to pull that fence back wide enough to allow a vehicle to go through there and not take those posts down for the neighbors and impacting their fences. So that's one change that's occurred in that area. The gates are scheduled to arrive in December, and so we're still working on all the infrastructure around that. There's another big piece that, as a result of that forced landing that occurred off field, was that airplanes showed up in our parking lot the day after, and we had to get back on the airport. Well, as you know, we had a manual gate on the west side of the building. Well, they started putting in the infrastructure there for the future exit gate. Well, that was now a little bit narrower than it was, and we were able to put the airplane on dollies and kind of work it through the fence. It was interesting to watch, but we do have a 40-foot swing gate that will be available for those kind of activities in the future, as well as the sheriff's night out when they take an airplane down to the park.
Ken, where will that be?
It's down on Gonai off of the perimeter road. So there's adequate
How will it get to the runway or how?
through the perimeter road onto the taxiway.
Okay.
So there's room to do that. The cracked ceiling was finished early. We actually had the NOTAM planned for, it was a total of 12 days. Thank goodness that it worked out timing-wise because of the weather. The contractor brought up a second crew, so they were able to do twice as much work and quite a bit faster. They ended up putting 19 tons of crack-filled material on the runway. It was originally engineered to be about 13 tons. The FAA agreed to the change order for the project, and being that they're paying 100%, I was happy for that too. The fog sealing and the runway remarking and the sign change will be done in the spring. Right now, we're on their schedule for June 1st. Last year, when we had a seasonal shutdown on the taxiway project, we scheduled it in May, and we ended up having to boot that until later in the year. So we thought that was a little bit more realistic. The design for the SRE building's underway. I just received some schematic drawings today, so you'll see that here shortly. I'll get that out to you. Too bad that Chris couldn't join us this evening, but if you have any other questions, I'll be sure to answer what I know.
Ken, one comment. I'd stepped away for a brief moment.
Yes, sir.
Just to fill everybody in, I always, if there's a reason why there's a deviation in fuel sales year over year.
Yeah, we didn't touch on that
Well,
report yet.
What's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that was just strictly the engineer report.
Oh, okay. I
So-
thought you were on your manager's report.
No,
Go ahead.
sorry about that.
Okay.
And Ken, I have switched over to phone audio now. I don't know. You've already given my report,
Chris.
but I don't know if you can hear me now.
Is that you? Loud and clear.
It is. I apologize for that.
Well, Chris, I briefly went over your report, but there might be a couple areas that you want to expound on. I touched briefly on the little change down by Apollo Lane due to the neighbors and the utility poles in the area, and I didn't cover any other item that I didn't talk about the gate schedule.
no,
I think they're still on course.
Sure. Yep. No, I heard all the updates you gave. So yeah, I'm available to answer any questions. But yeah, I think that pretty well covered it.
Any questions from members of the airport authority?
I guess I have one that's more of a put it on the radar if it's not surely already there, and that is there is private property on the southwest corner of the runway where the boat shrink wrapping place is. There, I think the built tenant.
Your way, I believe.
Yeah, on that property. And I've noticed and been alerted that it's now on the market, that entire parcel, which I think is surprisingly 17 acres or something like that, for quite a bit of money. Too much, I think. But the question I had was just in the grand scheme of the airport master plan and knowing what's going on around us, does anybody know offhand, and maybe particularly you, Chris, what the buildability is of that parcel, given the runway safe area, and do the people marketing it and do the people potentially buying it know this? And I don't know, maybe it's fully clear. I just knew that it popped up out there and wanted to make mention.
And so is the question with regards to the potential for somebody purchasing that property and looking for a through the fence type access, or from a perspective that development on that land may negatively impact the airspace around the airport?
I think based on its siting, I'd be surprised that if it wouldn't have through the fence privileges, I mean, to be paid for it, but that, you know, I mean, it borders the airport. My real question, Chris, I guess, is just has anyone approached the airport authority, approached you as the engineers to inquire about how that property does or does not overlap various build restriction zones? You know, it's just better to socialize these things early rather than late, as we've learned in our history. I just was curious if there had been any contact.
Sure. No, I personally haven't been contacted by anybody. Just briefly looking at where that property is with regards to like the building restriction line for the airport and the various surfaces. The development would have to get fairly tall before it negatively impacted the runway environment. So I don't, you know, I think the city planning process would probably help protect the airport in that regard. I think from a through the fence perspective, that would be a challenge at this point without an established agreement. And if that were to be a commercial through the fence activity, it's certainly a doable activity, but that would be something that would be a long process and would require some input from the FAA and certainly some effort on the airport authorities' perspective to get that set up. But yeah, no, I don't think just from an airspace perspective, I don't think the development there would it would have to get fairly high above the existing ground surface to impact the airport negatively. And then the through the fence stuff, I haven't heard of any rumblings there, but that's not to say that everyone reaches out to us first.
And I have one point on that as well. Carl, I don't know if you've seen the airport development concept. We did identify that land for future purchase. And this would be something that we should talk to the city about, both any available land around the airport for future procurement to protect the airport into the future. You know, we did identify that land east of Bravo, but there's since 11 acres of that has been sold. So there might be opportunity to purchase that. That would obviously require some sort of bonding on the city's part or other types of, you know, maybe somebody buys it and donates it to the airport. But, you know, we'd like that for protecting the airport. As you know, there's no real other place for an airport in the Carson City Valley. And, you know, if you're writing leases for 30 to 50 years, you know, vacant land is going to be at a premium. The other areas like there, I think it's called Technology Circle, where Farmers Brothers Coffee is by Arrowhead. There's about 10 or 12 acres there. And, you know, one of the beauties to those parcels is they do have some commercial development, which, you know, pays a lot better lease rate than ground rent. And so to make the airport financially sound into the future development on parcels like that, where the airport owned them and we're able to go to market for future commercial development would be beneficial. But that, I think that's something to address down the road a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, could I add something to that? This is Steve Takis.
Go ahead, please.
A couple of things. Number one, that's in a floodplain area, designated floodplain area. And so it would require probably significant elevation of land to be able to build on it. Now, if you do that, you're probably going to shift floodplain waters onto the airport. So that would be something that could be detrimental to the airport we'd have to look at. Number two, there was at one time where a school wanted to locate itself, a charter school wanted to locate itself on the airport, and they had selected that area as being the ideal location for their school. And when we researched it, we found that was the single area that had the most airplane crashes in the history of the airport. Because if you take off on 27, which is the primary use runway, and you have a climb stall, you're going to bank left right into that spot. And as a result, when we told the school that, you know, it would have been a bad solution for both the airport and the school. And so there are some significant issues with that area. Not to say it couldn't have some capability, but I think it could. The third thing is the through the fence ordinance in Title 19 doesn't include that area. It was originally designed for the industrial area, so it includes north of the airport and east of the airport. It doesn't really include the south side. Now, That's not an insurmountable problem. I think that's a kind of ordinance that could be changed if we saw economic value and we could do it safely. But those are just historical issues I thought you should be aware of.
Appreciate that. And I think that the last thing I'll just quickly say on this is, to what Ken hinted at, is that potentially developable land for an FBO activity, for an aviation-related business? And maybe that's where, Steve, then we'd entertain through the fence discussions.
Well, any other discussions on the engineering report? Okay. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you joining us this evening.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good evening, everybody.
What's that, Chris? Oh, okay. Ken, manager's report?
I don't have anything to add to what's written here. You were going to opine on
Yeah, I do
the
want
fuel
to
flow.
make one statement. Last year in October, we had an aerial surveillance company using a Piper Cheyenne or two, and they were buying a lot of jet fuel from the self-serve. We did not have the benefit of them this year, so that 8,000 gallon difference was what they bought from us last year off the self-serve. So that's
Thanks. I did not remember that. So.
yeah. Well, I do.
I kept thinking, is that around the air races? Why did we?
It was an aerial surveillance company using like one or two Piper Cheyennes, and it's amazing. A lot of customers will go out of their way to use that self-serve instead of having a truck fill them up. These guys would start up off our ramp, taxi out to the self-serve, shut down, in a turbine, and then fill up. But hey, whatever. God bless them. That's all I got to say about that. So
Michael, just a question then about that. What's your general, putting that aside, in terms of fuel usage this year to last year? What's the trend? And
I'd have to look. I'm going to wag it and say that we're probably 80% of last year. But on the other hand, our full service, it seems to be up over last year. Ken's probably the best guy to ask that question because I give him one report and our financial controller gives him another. I hate to say it, I don't know what's going on day to day, but I can tell you, on an annual basis,
I have a month-to-month trend.
I'll
have to go back and review it, but a 30,000 gallon month is been pretty consistent, and
yeah.
So I think trend-wise, we're in the ballpark on that.
I think it's probably 80% of last year, with the pandemic, with the shutdowns. That's what we're seeing at our other locations is we're doing 85% of the prior year just because travel is off a bit.
Right.
That doesn't mean activity is down, but travel's off a bit. People aren't going up to Canada or down to Mexico or out to Hawaii. They're staying more local. So.
thank you.
Yep. Steve, do you have anything to report to us in your legal counsel's report?
I do not.
Okay, fair enough. John isn't here. We had Beth give us the audit, and I'm going to take that as sufficient for the treasurer's report. I do have a couple things to report, but I'm going to give the opportunity to my counterparts. If anyone has anything, airport authority members have anything they want to report? Nope. Okay. Two matters. One is pandemic related. We'll start with the non-pandemic related. Historically, and Carl, you'll remember this well, the airport authority takes a break in December, and so we will not be meeting next month for our regularly scheduled airport authority meeting. We will be convening in January. Pandemic related, and this goes to our January meeting. and our scheduled meeting with Carson City Board of Supervisors. From what I'm hearing as recently as this afternoon, it is highly likely we won't be seeing one another in person. The trend is going to Governor Sisolak really pulling in the reins on this. So I would suspect that next month's meeting that we had scheduled with the Carson City Board of Supervisors is either going to be postponed or it's going to be virtual. Just a suspicion on my part.
It's going to be virtual.
It is going to be virtual. Okay, so you confirm that?
I did. I spoke to the city manager last week, and, this is not really set up for that
Oh,
size of a
okay.
group. And so the intent is that it will be virtual.
Okay. Well, this worked out well, and it's good to see everyone. It's been 9 months. Although I have seen Paul. Brad, I'm not sure I've seen you. I've seen Tim and Steve and Ken. Carl, I haven't bumped into you out at the airport, but, it's nice to get together as a group. We'll see what happens come January. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and happy holiday season. Please stay safe. Ken, we talked about a couple items for the next Airport Authority meeting. So we're going to have a policy
Yep, I've got a note for that.
agenda item. And then we'll bring back that recording device. Maybe have some other options to consider there. Anybody else from the Airport Authority want an item added to the agenda? Now would be a time, or you could let me know sometime next month.
We'll talk about the performance measures and strategic plan.
Yeah, I'll talk to you offline about that.
I was going to actually ask Mr. Chairman, we did not take an action around the work plan item, and just want to make sure there was nothing that was required at this
No,
time.
as we discussed, that was just a discussion item. And we're going to come back with a newly revised, up-to-date plan. Would that be accurate? I don't know if we'll do that in January or if we'll do that in February, but we'll have it.
Yeah, and it might be an 18-month plan just because of timing, so,
Right.
okay.
Okay?
A couple other items that we're going to have. I know that Mr. Takis has a comment, but.
Go ahead, Steve.
The
Oh,
TV,
I just wanted to know, for the December 3rd joint meeting, do we have a proposal that we're looking at, or is there something, I guess, Ken, what would you like the board members and me to do in preparation for
well,
that meeting?
I had a conference call with the city manager and deputy city manager last week. And so our objective is kind of twofold. One is we extended the cooperative agreement 1 year, so that expires May 17 of next year. So by the time we were through this whole process, able to circle back around and get this on a calendar, we're already on borrowed time. The next borrowed time item is the legislature meets on their session on February 1. So if there is, the discussion really is going to be between, do we as an airport authority going to assume sponsorship of the airport through a grant administrator process? Do we continue on a similar path as we have with the city? When I had conversations with the city last year prior to the extension of the agreement, they felt it was at that time, let's revisit this whole discussion about how the airport operates, whether we should be more involved. Now that they've seen, and this is me, it's not come out in so many words, but they've seen how the airport is functioning and what it's generating $65 million a year to the community through economic impact. And so I think they want to reevaluate how they've seen the airport in the past. Does it mean that there's any wholesale change in progress? No, because there's some legislation that directs how the airport is governed. But the real question is whether or not there's a sponsorship change or a co-sponsorship opportunity. Does the city still want to have that kind of involvement? One of the things that we want to eliminate as a group is we want to cut down the duplicate effort that we have on a lot of the leasing processes. And we want to codify how the revenue is, how the city compensates the airport for its management. So with that being said, there may be some language that we may want to look at again with the statute 844. I mean, it was something that was premature, obviously, last year when we went to the legislative session about changing the terms and some of the other archaic language, but there's still some archaic language that the agreement or the law requires that the city transfer the land. And, it's been 30 years and they haven't done that. So do we need to change that? And another piece of the discussion has been, how is the board made up? Does the city want to be more involved? Do they want different entities involved? Does the economic interests of the city, are they reflected? So the idea of the workshop was to flesh out some of these questions and kind of get a sense of where we're going. Because if we do have to take something to the legislature, we got to be on it. We have to find a sponsor. We have to know what the language is. So this is really two parties walking hand in hand in this. It's not so much what we as the airport authority want or what the city wants. It's how do we take what was originally planned 30 years ago, bring it up to date, and how do we move forward with it? So my input is I'm supposed to provide some sort of PowerPoint with some language information that, or examples. The city's input is they're preparing the staff report, and we're going to kind of just walk into this with some broad questions and see where that dialogue goes.
It sounds a little unstructured to me. And I know there may be a previous agreement as to how this is going to be going, but, showing up with a PowerPoint, this may be the only time we get to get in front of them. So I'd like to see a more structured approach with an agenda, with the bullet points of the key things that is, and put them in the order of importance. The most important one goes first because we may not get to number 4. And then the other thing I would say is I'd like to find, because there are two different groups here, some way to facilitate this. And maybe we bring back our the lady that worked on the plan with us or that sort of thing, but some sort of independent facilitator, because, technically these guys that we're going to be talking to are our bosses, and it'd be nice if there was a little bit of balance in terms of who's talking and that sort of thing. So those are just my thoughts.
Well, I would have to agree. I think we almost need some kind of a game plan as we go into this, and we've talked about some vague questions, but we really haven't seen much. And so, where are we? I think we need a little bit more planning before we go into this thing and know what some of our strategies should be. It's a big deal, I think, as far as with the city. So I just feel like I'd be going into this without hardly any direction or goal, or I'd like to know where we're going.
Well, we had a lot of this dialogue last year when we were talking about extending the agreement. And so a couple of things that popped out of that were the airport sponsorship. Does the original intent of the statute be enforced? That we go back where the city transfers the land to the airport, and the airport authority is the sole sponsor of the airport. Well, the FAA gave us a checklist of items that would have to be accomplished in order for that to be done. And they'd ruled specifically 30 years ago that they didn't feel the airport had the resources. There were taxing authorities who were specified in the legislation that we would have, but only if we go through the city process, because it's under their bonding authority that ad valorem tax would be instituted. And then the question became, and part of that dialogue was, well, do we want to be co-sponsors? Where in the end, the city has helped supporting the taxing authority, the granting authority, et cetera, but we really become the managers of the airport without having to go back to the Board of Supervisors for approval on leases and that sort of thing. So in my mind, there's like 3 items that I think are really important. One is for the law to match what we're doing. The cooperative agreement is only a year long, so we've got 6 months basically left in that agreement. There's a lot to figure out between now and then. The second is how is the airport compensated by the city from the tax revenues, and what's that formula look like, and how do we codify it so that at some point in the future, a future board doesn't say, why are we doing this? Why are we giving this money back to the airport? And then the third item would be the constitution of the board. Do we reflect the community enough, or is it so airport focused that, that maybe the airport is not getting the full benefit of the full community? That it's looked at as a playground just for the people who own an airplane, and it doesn't impact the rest of the community. And I think that's where Bradley and I have had a lot of conversation about it being an economic engine for the community, and how does that reflect it? So I welcome any feedback from the group.
I would suggest, if this is okay from a open meeting law standpoint,
But
Steve.
we're not agendized to take action on this.
Right.
So
All
at
I'm-
this point, we're just looking for some instruction.
All I'm suggesting is that basically what you've told us, if you could put your thoughts on paper and send it out to us, and then we can tell you what would make us comfortable in terms of a meeting, because this is it. This is the only chance we're going to get, I think. And there also, I remember going through this with you and how confused I was regarding all the laws and everything. And I'll probably have a lot of questions for you before the meeting. So it would be helpful.
I will do that.
Steve, anything else?
No, I think I've created enough havoc.
Okay, fair enough. On that note, this meeting's adjourned.